Hello everyone. Today we are going to start up a new module altogether. That is the fifth module. The module's name is DSP processor. It's an entire chapter being dedicated to processors and its various components. We will be looking different kind of processor that we would be interfacing in the that we would be interfacing for hardware. Filters over here now. So let us begin with the introduction. First of all, explain the need of digital signal processing or DSP in general. Now, DSP or digital signal processing is a method of processing real world signals represented by a sequence of numbers using mathematical techniques to perform transformation or to extract information. So if in case I am speaking to someone on a cell phone or via video call, so a certain amount of data is being extracted and it is being processed for further simplification. If my video is being uploaded on YouTube, for example, so certain part of the data is being extracted to its recorded need, or I would say उनको जैसे ज़रूरत हो वैसे, and then it is being processed on the YouTube platform. So similarly, the DSP is a method of processing the real world signals using some mathematical techniques to perform transformation or to extract information. Now, generally, we don't speak in a digital signal. A digital signal is a language of ones and zeros that can be processed by mathematics. Now, we speak in real world. So, we speak in real world analog signals. So, whenever we say analog, so we say that it is whenever we speak, we say that it is in analog format. So yes, in the real world we do not speak digital language. We do not speak to anyone say 0 1 0 1 0 1 2 1 2 0 1 0, sorry, in binary. We generally say hi, hello, how do you do, and so on and so forth. Similarly, a digital signal is a representation of the analog signal. Now, in the real world, we can convert these signals into your digital signals through analog to digital conversion process. Now, the process a to D by using an ADC processor, then the process the signals, and if required, bring the signal back out to the analog world through the digital to analog converter over here. To give you a simple example, you can consider the use of a telephone, wherein when you speak or when you talk to someone, your analog voice is converted into a digital stream of data. That digital stream is being carried over a certain length, and then that data or that digital data is then converted back to the normal audio in order for the another person to receive your voice. So yes, in the real world, your analog signal is being A to D conversion is being done. Then your process the signal is being processed, as you might have as you might have learned in PC or principle of communication, wherein the signal is being modulated on a carrier wave and it is being sent on a long distance for communication, and then if required, the signals are being brought out back to the analog world through the D to A converter over here. Now, a DSP, first of all, is a type of a microprocessor. As you can see over here, a DSP is a microprocessor which is incredibly fast and powerful. A DSP processes data in real time, so you don't need to worry about that you need to give input right now and you will be having an output after certain time. एकदम फटाफट सामने सामने बेटा. Now, some of the advantages of designing with DSPs over microprocessors are as follows. Single cycle multiply accumulate operation, one of the most important feature of DSP, wherein in a single cycle your multiplication can be pipelined, or it can be done in a parallel way. Real time performance simulation as well as your emulation, flexibility, then reliability, much more secure than microprocessor. System performance is increased, but yes, at the cost of increasing the resources being used in the computer. So yes, the system, although they have mentioned increased system performance over here, but it does come at a cost wherein your resources which are being available like in your RAM memory or cache memory is being utilized at a great extent. But of course it is reduced, it is what do you say, at a reduced cost available, so that it becomes famous and has an advantage over microprocessor in general. Now we'll move on to the next topic. The topic is called as what do you say, fixed point and floating point DSP processors. Now what is fixed point, what is floating point, we'll discuss beta. Now what do you say, the fixed point, just a moment, I'll adjust. Now, the fixed point and the floating point are the data formats used by the DSP processor. So, your DSP processor uses two simple kind of what do you say, types, wherein either the data is in what do you say, fixed point, or it is in floating point over here. Now, in your what do you say, fixed point representation, your integer values are used for all the mathematical operations performed by the DSP algorithms, but it has a limited dynamic range. So, a floating point representation has comparatively large dynamic range, so it has an added advantage over fixed point representation. Now these two data formats indicate that that a particular processor is specialized to perform operations in that format, either in fixed point, either in floating point. So yes, what do you mean by a fixed point? Now in this, it is the type of representation which indicates a format by which the fixed numbers of digits are used to represent the number before and after the decimal point. So it does include your decimal point into consideration, and it is the what do you say, a processor which the fixed point representation is the one in which wherein you have all the liberty to go up till n number beyond the decimal point. Now it uses 2's complement form and it represents both positive and negative numbers over here. You might have learned or you might have practiced 2's complement in your subject DSD or DLDA, digital logic designing and application. Now the two types of fixed point representation are used by DSP processors, namely one of them is what do you say, 16 bits, and the another one is 32 bits. Now a 16-bit representation has a maximum range of what do you say 2 raised to 16, which is equals to 65536 bits. So in this case, 1 bit is used to represent the sign. So the range, what do you say, is so the range is from -32768 to 32767 over here. Now, to represent any number in a fixed point representation format, a scaling factor is used. What do we mean by scaling factor? We'll study right now. Consider that we have to represent the number 1.234 in a fixed point format. Now, then skipping the decimal point, the number is considered as an integer having a value 1234 with what do you say, a scaling factor of 1 by 1000. So what do you say, it is represented as 1234 into 1 by 1000, which is equals to 1.234 over here. Now this scaling factor is constant for entire calculations. Now the programmer has to use entire variable word length in case of what do you say, fixed format representation. Now for this the following rules are being used. Now consider a number represented in fixed point format is 12345.678, and suppose the available word length is of say 6 bits over here. So now if you calculate, if you look at over here, we have 8 digits to be performed, 8 digits पे हमें काम करना होगा. Then the programmer has to represent this number as 12345.6. That means the last 2 bits are eliminated. One of the drawback of what do you say, fixed point representation. On the other hand, if the represented number is small, then the available word length, then the programmer has to scale up the number. In other words, he has to add extra what do you say, decimal ke baad zeros, and he has to scale up the number because the entire word length, for example over here it was 6 bits, so he has to use this entire 6 bits which is available. So it becomes tedious for the programmer to design in fixed point representation. Now coming to the floating point representation, one of the most what do you say, important part. Now, for better computational accuracy, a floating point representation is used. Now, there are many floating point representation formats, but usually the format standardized under IEEE 754 in 1985 is being used. Now, it consists of what do you say, three components: sign bit, sign component, and mantissa. You have one more component called as the exponent. So you have sign component, then one exponent, and then one mantissa. The two standard formats are used in practice, namely 32-bit single precision and format, and 64-bit double precision format. Now, a 32-bit positive number has a range from 2 raised to minus 49 to 3.403 into 10 raised to power 38, and the range of 64-bit is minus 10 raised to the power minus 308 to 10 raised to the power 10 raised to the power 308 over here. Now, in case of floating point representation, there are two parts, mantissa and the exponent. The binary point is always after the MSB or the most significant bit in the mantissa. Now, accordingly, every number is scaled and position after the decimal point varies. Now, in case of single precision format, that is nothing but 32-bit representation, one sign bit, that is single sign bit over here, one bit for sign over here, 8 exponent bits, and 23 mantissa bits are being used as shown in the diagram over here. So 8 bits are nothing, exponent means, that means the one which are actual numbers, and mantissa means 10 raised to the power 10 raised to the power wala format. So mantissa over here represents the one which is in the format of 10 raised to the power 2, 3, 4 depending upon the situation. So sign bit is either for plus or minus, 8 bits is actual the number, and over here it is a multiple of 10 over here. Now, similarly, now, while in case of double precision format, that is nothing but 64-bit representation, one sign bit, that is nothing but 11 exponent components, as you can see over here in the diagram, and 52 mantissa bits are shown in the figure. Now, this is the diagram for 64-bit representation, wherein 64 bits is being split up into three sections. One bit is given for sign bit, the another 2 bits, 11 bits is for exponent, and 52 bits is for mantissa over here. Now we would proceed with the comparison between fixed point and the floating point implementation over here. It was been asked once that do compare the difference between the fixed point and the floating point representation. Now, many a times this becomes an important topic when it comes to Viva. So yes, I would expect that everyone please pay attention over here. Now, fixed point implementation, it has a limited dynamic range. That is example 16-bit integer represents a maximum range of 65,536. Now, over here in floating point implementation, it has large dynamic range. Example, single bit positive number has a range 2 raised to minus 149 to 3.409 into 10 raised to power 38, and double precision number has a range from minus 10 raised to the power minus 308 to 10 raised to the power 308 over here. Now, the difference between two successive numbers, whether it is in a fixed point, whether it is small, whether it is a small valued or large valued, remains the same. The difference remains the same. Over here, the difference between two successive small valued number and the large valued number is quite different, and errors due to rounding and truncation are large, so it has less precision, or it has less precision, or I would say less accuracy. Floating point representation gives larger precision or larger accuracy. Output of multiply and add stage produces error in the algorithm in fixed point implementation, while over here, due to the large dynamic range, such errors are not produced in floating point implementation. In fixed point, software implementation is quite complicated. The software implementation is quite easy in nature. Now, over here we have fixed point implementation, and less computational power is required over here, wherein for floating point more computational power and more number of steps for coding are being required. Addition of two numbers does not affect the accuracy or the precision. Addition of two numbers usually affects the precision over here. Then what do you say, the rounding and truncation over here, that is being mentioned over here, the rounding and truncation must be a part of the program. It is not necessary in floating point to specify rounding and the truncation over here. Now overflow errors, as we had discussed in the previous lecture, overflow errors occur because the size of the intermediate register is comparatively small. Whereas in floating point the size of the intermediate register is around 80 bits, quite bigger in number. So overflow error does not occur over here. Now it requires less registers and less number of input output pins, whereas in floating point requires large registers and more number of input output pins over here. So there is a question arises among the student, that's which processor to be selected for application. So there is a thin line wherein or I would say some fixed points on which you can decide whether you want to choose a fixed point processor or a floating point processor. Now several parameters should be considered while selecting a fixed point or a floating point representation. The fixed point DSPs are less costly, but the implementation of algorithms in floating point DSP is easy. The precision requirement should also be considered while choosing between fixed point and the floating point implementations. A 32-bit fixed point representation has more precision than 32-bit floating point representation. So if large magnitude differences are required, then floating point is preferred because such range is not available in your fixed point. Then when you would say that when your computational accuracy is an important parameter, then floating point representation is preferred. However, depending upon the application, a particular type of presentation is selected. For example, in case of audio signals, the human ear is much sensitive, so accuracy is prime important. For such applications, floating point implementation is preferred. Now in case of images, that is nothing but standstill images, the human eye is not sensitive for small changes in the pixels. Here the accuracy is not the primary requirement, so fixed point implementation is preferred over here. Given upon the debate over which processor to be used, whether fixed or floating, so some of the applications where fixed point implementation is preferred are, firstly is image processing, second one is video signal processing, and third one is automotive control signal processing. Then some of the applications where accuracy also plays an important role. So over here some of the applications where floating point implementation is preferred are high speed data communication, then military applications, and radar signal processing, the one which we are going to study in the next module. Now computer architecture for signal processing. So generally you have two standard architectures, one of them being von Neumann and the another one being Harvard architecture. So we'll study both of them. More detail about such processor will be listed in microprocessors theory subject, that is I guess in the 4th or the 5th semester, I don't recollect exactly. So you can also refer those notes, and you can have those answers also for your DSP app, question answers. Now typical DSP based controller architecture. Now the computer architectures are normally available in two types to be classified them very broadly. First namely von Neumann, and second one is Harvard architecture. Now let us discuss the same in this section over here. So yes, let's begin. Now there are two types of architectures over here. One of them is von Neumann, another one is Harvard architecture. So von Neumann architecture, here the conventional architecture refers to the uniprocessor system. Some of the parallelism features can definitely be implemented on a single processor to improve the speed, but there is a limitation to the same. let us discuss certain basics of a single processor over here. The architecture of processor began with the IAS's von Neumann chapter, von Neumann computer. The figure that is being depicted over here, as you can see over here the diagram, it is a quite simple diagram consisting of an ALU, then accumulator, then your program counter, your IR instruction register, your control unit, then over here your memory address register, then over here your data register. So this simple diagram or this simple accumulation of certain components is the structure of your CPU or the structure of your von Neumann architecture. The system has three units. One of them is central processing unit. The system has 3 unit CPU, 3 unit CPU, memory and input output devices. The CPU has 2 units, arithmetic unit and control unit. Let us discuss these units in detail. Now, first is the input unit over here. A computer accepts inputs from the user through these devices. That is input devices. The commonly used input devices are, it is very simple to understand this topic. The commonly used input devices are keyboard and mouse. Besides that, there are devices like joystick, camera, scanner, etc., which are also input devices. Now, these devices, the devices input the data accepted from the user in a proper coded form, which is understood by default by the computer. Now, output unit. Now, the result is given back by the computer to the user through an output device. Input devices and output devices are also called as human interface devices because they are used to interface the human to the computer. The mainly used output devices are monitor and printer, but there are many other output devices like your plotter, then we have one speaker, if needed, then connected. Now, ALU. Now, arithmetic or logic operations like multiplication, addition, division, and or XOR, etc. are performed by ALU. Operands are brought into the ALU. One of the most important thing to focus on, beta. Operands are brought into the ALU where the necessary operation is being performed. So, now, the control unit. The control unit, as we know, is the main unit that controls all the operations of the system inside and outside the processor. The memory or the input output devices have to be controlled by the computer to perform the operation according to the instruction given to it. So in case if you want to perform some addition, some multiplication, some division, any type of calculation that you want to process is being handled by the control unit, and it performs it very specifically to that specific instruction. The memory unit. The memory is used to store programs and data for the computer. The instructions from the programs are taken by the processor, decoded and executed accordingly. Now, the data that the data is also stored in the memory. The data is then taken from the memory and the operation is performed on that data as well as the results are stored in the memory. In some cases, the input to an operation and the result may also be from an input and output devices. Now, memory in the von Neumann system has a very special organization wherein the data and the instruction are stored in the same memory, one of the most important key feature. We will see about this in the subsequent section. So the key features of von Neumann machine was the von Neumann machine uses stored program concept. The program and data are stored in the same memory unit. So yes, we need to understand this topic, and each location of the memory has a unique address, that is, no two locations can have the same memory address. Execution of your instructions in von Neumann machine is carried out in a sequential manner unless explicitly altered by the program itself from one instruction to the next instruction. Now let us move into the detailing of the detailed structure of your CPU. So let me show you the diagram of your CPU over here. As you can see over here, the diagram is quite simple in nature. You have one ALU, you have one BALU. ALU is a arithmetic logic unit. This one is accumulator A and C. accumulator AC, which might have some data registers as A and B. Then this is connected to some another different data registers. Then over here you have memory address register. Then over here you have program counter. Then over here you have instruction register, and then over here you have your control unit. Now, so the block diagram, what do you say, of the computer proposed by the von Neumann had a minimal number of registers along with the above blocks. These computer had a small set of instruction, and an instruction was allowed to contain only one operand, a single operand. Beta, the diagram which was being just showed by me gives the detailed structure of IAS CPU. The structure shown consists of three following registers. One of them is accumulator. Accumulator, it normally provides one of the operand to ALU and stores the result. Data register, it acts as buffer storage between the CPU and the main memory or input output devices. So it data register is generally acting as a buffer storage between your CPU and your main memory. Then you have your your program counter that is being mentioned over here, your program counter. Now it always contains the address of the next instruction to be executed, your program counter. Then you have the instruction register. It holds the current instruction, that is the opcode and operand of the instruction to be executed. So I guess my students might be now aware of opcode and operand. So I don't need to specifically go by what do we mean by opcode and what do we mean by operand. Now, memory address register, that is nothing but MAR. Now, the address from which the data or instruction is to be fetched is provided by the processor through your MAR. It is also it also is used to forward the address of memory location where your data is to be stored. So MAR also provides the final address where your data has to be stored post your mathematical operation is being performed on the opcode over there. Moving on to the further topic, we will start with Harvard architecture. So yes, what do we mean by Harvard architecture, and what is the specific structure? I'll just show you the diagram one so that it becomes easier for my students to understand. This is a simple block diagram of the Harvard architecture, wherein it has a data memory, a DSP in between, and then a program memory over here. So it is a game between three different kind of memory or two different memories along with a processor which is being connected in between. So yes, let us discuss that topic now. The term Harvard architecture is usually used now to refer to a particular computer architecture design philosophy where separate data paths exist for the transfer of instructions and the data. भाई आपका जो instruction होगा और data होगा वो अलग अलग path पे जाएगा. Now all the computers consist primarily of two parts, that is the CPU which processes data and the memory which holds the data over here. Now the memory in turn has two aspects to it, the data itself and the location where it is found, now known as the address. Now both are important to the CPU, as many common instructions boil down to something like take the data in this address and add it to that data in that address without actually knowing what the data itself is. So in the recent years, the speed of the CPU has grown many times in comparison to the memory it talks to. So care needs to be taken to reduce the number of times you access it in order to keep the performance. Now, if for instance every instruction run in the CPU requires an access to memory, the computer gains nothing for increased CPU speed. It has no added advantage over here. A problem referred to being as memory bound, wherein it has to every time access the memory, hence it is being bounded by the memory. Now, memory can be made much faster but only at high cost. The solution then is to provide a small amount of very fast memory known as cache. Now, as long as the memory of the CPU needs is as long as the memory the CPU needs is in the cache, the performance hit is very much less than it is if the cache then has to turn around and get the data from the main memory. So it is as simple as in your a temporary address, or I would say your cache memory, wherein your last location or the last set of data is being stored, so that every time your data is not being accessed from the real actual location but from your cache memory over here. Now, tuning the cache is an important aspect of computer design. Now, the Harvard architecture refers to one particular solution to this problem. The principal feature of the Harvard architecture is that the program and the data memories lie in two separate spaces, permitting a full overlap of instruction fetch and execution. Standard microprocessors are characterized by a single bus structure for both data and your instructions. Suppose that we wish to read a value OP1 or OP1 at the address, say ADR1 in your memory, into the accumulator and then store it at other two addresses, that is nothing but ADR2 and ADR3. The instructions could be as simple as LDA, that is load the operand OP1 into your accumulator from ADR1, then STA or store OP1 in the address ADR2, and store the address store OP1 or the opcode or the value OP1 at the address ADR3. Now, in a standard processor without Harvard architecture, the program instruction and the data are held in one memory space. Thus, the fetching of the next instruction while the current one is executing is not allowed. So yes, because the fetch and the execution phase each requires memory access over here. I'll repeat the statement. In a standard processor which doesn't have an Harvard architecture, the program instruction and the data are held in one memory space. Therefore, for fetching of the next instruction while the current one is executing, it's not allowed, because the fetch and the execution phase each requires memory access over here. Now, in a Harvard architecture, since the program instructions and data lie in separate memory spaces, the fetching of the next instruction can overlap the execution of the current instruction. Now, therefore, the instruction fetch involves fetching the next instruction from memory, and instruction execute involves either reading or writing the data into the memory beta. Now, instructions and data are stored in two separate caches to improve your performance. However, this has the disadvantage of having the amount of cache available to either one. So it works best only if the CPU reads instruction and data at about the same frequency, so that it becomes simple for the CPU to perform multitasking, to become a multitasking processor. Now, pipelining. Now, what do we mean by pipelining? As you might have understood from the word, that what do we mean by pipelining? Still, will let me allow me to introduce you to the concept. The functional units in the CPU can be kept busy for all the time. Now, this can be done by processing number of instructions simultaneously. It is very much simple to the CPU can be kept busy by using by providing it instructions every now and then, so that it becomes unavailable for the next instruction, and in that way the clock the memory runs out of space, and you might receive a blue screen error many a times. That is in the case of an Intel processor, not a DSP. Yes, in the case of a DSP, the device would perform very slowly in case if it runs out of memory. So yes, it is one of the drawback. Now, generally, one complete instruction starts from fetching an instruction and ends with execution of that specific instruction. Now, the total required time period is allocated for different purposes throughout the instruction. Now, as an entire instruction can be divided into number of small instructions called as micro instructions, That means entire instruction can be divided into number of phases over here. Now let us consider that in a typical instruction there are 4 phases as follows. Fetching instruction from the from the program memory, decoding of instruction, reading of operand which is necessary for execution of instruction, and execution of instruction, and storing the result over here. Now each of this phase or micro instruction, that is the single instruction over here, can be carried out separately by 4 functional units in the CPU. So suppose each micro instruction requires some amount of execution time. Now in a conventional process, the CPU processes only one instruction at a time. So each functional unit is busy only for 1/4 or actual time period. So but in the case of processor which uses pipelining, all these 4 micro instructions can be carried out simultaneously in the CPU. So the amount of time required is very much less, and the multiplier and your accumulator, that is nothing but MAC over here. Now what do we mean by that? Let us discuss. Now this block consists of adder, multiplier, and an accumulator. Now inputs for the MAC are fetched from some memory location and fed to the multiplier block of your MAC. Now this multiplier block performs multiplications and gives the result to the adder. Adder will add the multiplier results to the previously accumulated result. Now according to the requirement, the result of accumulator can also be stored into the memory. Entire process is achieved in a single clock cycle. So it is one of the important feature wherein this entire processing can be done in one simple clock cycle. So desirable features of Mac, that what are the things that we can expect out of Mac, that its speed should be faster. It should have input format control, so that any type of numbers can be multiplied. It can be either wherein if you have an input for fixed, or in wherein you have an input for floating point, so it should be able to process both the types of format over there. Now for the output, single or double precision options should be available. Pipeline multiplier should be used for higher outputs over there, and for the fixed point implementation, sufficient numbers of extensions should be provided. So yes, for fixed point implementation, sufficient number of extension bits or some extra bits should be provided. Now special instruction, yes, we do need to understand what do we mean by special instruction. Many a times it becomes important for us to perform some special kind of instructions in middle of an execution of an instruction. So yes, what are those instructions? Let's discuss beta. Now these are some special instructions that are provided by your DSP processors. These instructions are mainly categorized as follows: instructions which support your DSP operation, application oriented instructions, then instructions used to reduce down the overheads. The advantages of using special instructions are as follows: more compact code is generated which requires less memory space. Then execution speed of DSP algorithm is increased if you are using some special instructions. Then just a moment, beta, let me adjust. Now in many DSP applications, digital filtering or correlation algorithms are used. Basically these operations needs delay, multiplication, and accumulation of your result. The special instructions LTD and MPY are used in TMS 320 processor, simultaneously performing these operations in your DSP operations. In DSP operation, many times repeat instructions are also required. Consider an example of FIR filter designing. You have an equation y of n which is equals to summation k equals to 0 to n minus 1. h of k into x of n minus k. Now, this equation requires multiplication and your accumulation repeatedly up till n times. Your n can be any value, it can be 10, it can be 20, it can be 40, it can be 100. So, up till n minus 1 value. So, yes, you need to multiply and add the result values up till that many times. Now, in such cases, special instructions can be used to speed up the processor. Now, in your TMS 320 processor, the following instructions are used to perform this operation. One of them is repeat. It's repeat NM1 and MACD, what do you say, HNM1 comma x of NM1. Now here the repeat instruction loads the n minus 1 into repeat instruction counter. The multiplication and accumulation is performed using MACD instruction. It is repeated n times. Now in Motorola DSP processor, MAC instruction along with repeat instruction is used to perform this operation. So the basic format of fetch packet is shown over here. As you can see over here, this is a simple example of a fetch packet wherein it is of 32 bits over here, from ranging from 0 to 31 over here. One bit, that is p bit, is being reserved for certain kind of flag over here, which will be very shortly we will discuss what do we mean by this p over here. Now in case of FFT algorithms, if you look out for the FFT algorithm, just a moment, beta, let me adjust. Now, in case of FFT algorithms, bit shuffling or bit reversal is required, as we had seen for numericals in your DI TFFT, wherein the input sequence was being used was being done using bit reversal system. Now, in case of TMS 320 processor, bit reversing is performed using the following instruction. A certain instruction is being used. Now, due to the complex data, that is nothing but real and imaginary parts, are stored in two different locations over here. Now, we'll proceed for another topic called as replication. Now, what do we mean by replication and what is its importance? We'll discuss very smoothly. Now, usually two or more basic units are used for replication. In this case, your CPU and at least one arithmetic elements are used for replication. Now, in many processors, the concept of parallel processing is used over here. Now, in case of C67XX processor, at a time 8 instructions are fetched. One of the big important revolution when this processor was being developed. Now, this is called as fetch packet, and it contains 8 packets, that is nothing but 256 bits over here. Now, every instruction over here contains a p bit, and it decides whether the instruction should be performed parallelly or not, as you had seen in this diagram over here, the fetch instruction diagram over here. So this p bit is actually for parallel execution. Whether if this bit is set to 1, then it might go for parallel execution. If it is not set to 1, then it will perform then it will be done using serial method. Now, suppose for instruction 3 over here, I'll show you the diagram and read out the statement so that it becomes easier for you to understand. Now, suppose that for instruction 3 over here, the p bit is 1. Instruction 3 and 4 are executed parallelly. That means both these instructions are executed in one cycle. If the p bit of instruction 3 over here, that is this one, is 0, then the instructions 3 and 4 are not executed parallelly. That means they are executed in two different cycles. Now, all the instructions that are executed in parallel contains the execute packet, that is the P is set to 1 over here. Now execute packet. Execute packet contains 8 instructions, and each instruction is executed using different functional unit. The last P bit of each fetch packet is always 0, because since it is the last bit, it has to be not to be performed parallelly with any other data. Hence the last data packet bit or the last P bit is set to 0. Thus the boundary of each execute packet is limited to 8 words over here. Now there are 3 types of P bit patterns as follows. The types of P bit patterns are: one is fully serial, one is fully parallel, and the last one is partially serial over here. Now what is that? Let us see. In this case, your fully serial, in each since the name is only fully serial, that means each case your P bit of the figure that we had seen over here, this figure beta, this one is the 0. So every instruction is executed serially, one after the other. That means every instruction is executed in a different cycle. Now fully parallel, in this case every P bit except the last P bit of figure except the last bit that we had discussed over here, this is the last bit. So except this bit, every other P bit will be set to 1. Here all the 8 instructions are executed in parallel. Now partially serial, consider that the P bits of instruction 3, 4, 6 and 7 of this diagram over here, as you can see over here, this diagram over here, the instructions 3, 4, 6 and 7 are 1, and the remaining P bits are 0. So what happens in this case is, so in this case, now in this case the instructions 3, 4, 5 are executed in parallel. Similarly instruction 6, 7 and 8, जो भी आपको P पैकेट दिया होगा बेटा, उसके बाद वाला पैकेट भी पैरेलल में जाएगा. Since 3 and 4 packet bits were set to 1, so it will be 3, 4 and 5. Similarly 6, 7 packet bits were given to be as 1, so it will be 6, 7 and 8 executed in parallel. Now other instructions are executed serially. Now there is a topic called as on-chip memory, something which is very much important beta. Now on-chip memory, that is nothing but the chip memory that is being implemented on board, or I would say on your exact chip over there. Usually the DSP processors operate at a very fast speed, that is while the memory devices are having low speed. Now to match the speeds, usually the processor is slowed down. Now for this purpose, some wait stages are added in the software, so that आपका जो एग्जीक्यूशन आपका जो सॉफ्टवेयर है वो कहीं लोड ना ले ले एक्स्ट्रा प्रोसेसर का. सो some hardware circuitry is also allowed to slow down the speed of the processor, but many DSP chips contain fast on-chip RAM or ROM on them. In such processors, the slow external memories are used to hold the code. Now at the initialization stage, the code is transferred to the internal memory, which is but of course fast. Now in case of traditional DSP, partitioning of memory was required. Now the main program, then the data, then the loop up tables, etc. are required to be carefully stored by making partitions in the memory. Now this was necessary in order to reduce the access to external memory along them. Now the external memory was required because traditional DSPs had limited memory space. So this was one of the reasons why your external memory was being included. Now due to access of external memory, the time delay involved was while execution was more. We needed, since our processor was initially fast, we wanted it to be slow a little bit. Hence due to the access to your external memory, the time delay involved while the execution was more. It's a win-win situation for us. Now it was also required to separate out the fast and the slow memory devices. Now, but nowadays But nowadays, Intel architectures have large cache memories. So it's like you have a big cache memory which is connected to your processor, which provides extreme fast processing speed. So it is not required to separate out the fast and the slow memory devices. But in case of the programs, data lookup tables etc, are located at far places in the memory, so the output data is generated sequentially, as well as accessing the memory on multiple pages is avoided. Now we'll proceed for the topic called as extended parallelism. Now, in many processors, parallel processing technique are used to increase your computational efficiency. These techniques are SIMD, VLIW, and superscalar processing. We'll study each and every one of them, don't worry. Now, SIMD micro architecture, the term micro is important over here. Micro architecture is being introduced, and your instructions. Now, SIMD stands for single instruction, multiple data. That means using single instruction, your multiple data can be operated simultaneously. Now, consider that four floating points. Consider that four floating point number, that is nothing that are those are 16 bits each, are to be added with another four floating point numbers. So traditionally operation is performed sequentially. That means by executing addition operation separately. Now in in your SIMD, these four numbers are fetched into 64-bit SIMD register, and addition is done using single instruction as shown in the figure over here, in a single cycle over here, the single diagram over here, wherein this 4 D C A B C D are being added to E F G H, another four floating numbers, using a single instruction, that is nothing but the X or operand. Now in SIMD, these four numbers are fetched in 64-bit SIMD register, and addition is done using single instruction as shown in the figure. Now in case of SHARC processor, SHARC, this is a different type of processor that we will be discussing later on. In case of SHARC processor, there is a provision of switching on and off for SIMD operation, that is single instruction multiple data operation. Now in DSP, the calculations are, I would say, very much tedious in nature, but in some calculations like your FFT algorithm or your FIR filter designing, the calculations contain multiplication and delay over there. So in such calculations, SIMD is the better option. It saves the time required for your calculation, and it is similar to your multimedia extension, that is nothing but your MMX operation in Pentium, which makes use of SWAR, that is nothing but SIMD within a register over here. Now operating system over here, in order to save and restore the register state, streaming SIMD extension, that is nothing but SSE, is required. Most of this extension instructions are applicable for single precision floating point data. Now SSE is designed by Intel, and Intel's first SIMD effort was MMX, and now it has expanded as SSE2, SSE3 and SSE4. Now in SIMD, the calculations are performed parallelly, and every time for all the contents of data, the same instruction is executed. This is a simple step called as your lock step. Now many operating systems are capable of executing different calculations at the same amount of time. Now these are under the category MIMD, or multiple input multiple data, that multiple input multiple data. Now SSE2 contains instructions for double precision, that is 64-bit floating point, and and with this, programs can perform SIMD operations from 8-bit to 64-bit floating points over here. Now your SSE3 over here is called as Prescott new instruction or PNI that contains more DSP related mathematical instruction. Now, in SSE4, dot product instructions and additional integer instructions are also introduced. So this was all for today. In the next lecture, we'll be starting up with VLIW architecture and its further, some certain topics. Up till then, please do be safe and thank you, bacha.